who would want to murder 4-year-old Cash Gernon and why? Let's find out. Welcome back to Killer Bites. In Southwest Dallas on May 15th, 2021, a jogger was out on her morning routine of jogging around the neighborhood to get some exercise. It was a typical morning until she saw something unusual in her path. At first she thought maybe she saw an injured animal, perhaps a dog that had been hit by a car. But as she got closer to the subject, she realized she was looking at a little boy laying in the road. The boy appeared to be very young and had no sort of identification on him. The jogger had no idea who this little boy was, but knew he needed help. The little boy had no shirt on and no shoes on. His feet were covered in ants and he was completely covered in blood. And she determined that this little boy was no longer alive. So she dialed 911 around 7 a.m. The police show up shortly after the call, and unfortunately they too cannot figure out who this little boy is. There were no current reports in that area of a missing person around this child's age. So the police start knocking on doors in the surrounding area to see if any of the neighbors could help identify the victim. Unfortunately, nobody was able to help. Meanwhile, 8 blocks away from the crime scene, Monica Sherrod has started her day. It was around 10 a.m. that Monica woke up and started getting her 5 biological kids, plus 2 twin boys that belonged to her ex-boyfriend, up and ready for the day. All the kids were up and running around the house except one of the twin boys named Cash Gernon. Monica didn't think much of it at first. She thought maybe Cash just needed some extra sleep and was still laying in bed. But after some time passes and Cash is still not up with the other kids, Monica decided it was time to go into his shared bedroom and wake him up. She gets the kids involved and has them looking around the house and the neighborhood areas, but no one could find Cash. Monica is in total panic at this point and decides it's time to call the police around 11 a.m. and reports Cash is missing. The police go to Monica's residence to help. They sit down and talk with Monica and ask her questions. They were asking her pretty standard questions like, do you know anybody that would want to hurt Cash? Do you have any idea where he could have gone? And during this interview is when the kids remember that Monica has a baby monitor or a nanny camera set up in Cash and his twin brother's bedroom. So Monica and the police go to check out the camera footage and find some truly horrifying footage that no parent should ever have to see. The black and white camera caught footage on a man entering Cash's bedroom at 5 o'clock a.m. He then stands there hovering over Cash, just staring at him for several minutes. After some time passes, he removes the blanket from Cash's body, picks the little boy up into his arms, and the two leave the house. And then later on the camera, this man came back into the home and back into the bedroom. He came back around 7:30 a.m. In this time, he is standing and hovering over Cash's brother's bed, but this time he starts pacing around the room. But then, he leaves the house. Cash's brother remained untouched, safe and sound in his bed. Upon seeing this footage, Monica was able to identify the kidnapper right away. She pointed out that it was Darriynn Brown. Darriynn Brown was actually a schoolmate of Monica's older son. Although the two went to school together, they were not super close friends. However, Darriynn had been over to their house a few times before. Monica and her family were not big fans of Darriynn. In fact, one of Monica's daughters had said on more than one occasion that she didn't like Darriynn at all and he totally creeped her out. And now I guess we know why, because he's definitely a creep and confirmed to be a bad dude. Actually, right before all of this went down, Darriynn had just gotten out on bond for stealing a car and fleeing from police. Well, it turns out that Darriynn has a deep history of run-ins with the law. He has a deep rap sheet, including an arrest for possession of in 2020 and an arrest for possession of in 2016, just to name a few. Neighbors confirmed that they had even seen Darriynn in the previous weeks leading up to the kidnapping of Darriynn scouting out the neighborhood. One of the neighbors found on his home security cameras footage of Darriynn lurking around Monica's home and peering over her fence. And some of the neighbors had actually previously called the police about Darriynn, but nothing was ever really done. But with the death of 4-year-old Cash Gernon and the video evidence, the police could finally take some action. So the police went over to Darryn's house on May 15th, 2021. They searched the house and spoke with his mother, Mimi Brown. Mimi told the police that there was no way that her son could have committed the crimes that they were accusing him of. She said her son was totally innocent, even though there's video evidence that proves it was him. And she actually looked at the footage and was still convinced that her son didn't do it. She said that she had been with her son all week and that he couldn't possibly have done it because he never left, yada, 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 yada. But I guess that's what mothers do. They try to protect their children at all costs, even if they have done something wrong, and even if they were caught red-handed by the police. But it didn't matter what Mimi said to defend her son, the police still came in and arrested him on the spot. In the search of the home, the police found some bloody tissues, as well as a small pocket knife. Okay, so now get this. 2 days before Cash's disappearance, Monica had run to the grocery store, and when she returned home, she actually found Darriynn in her home playing with Cash. And when Monica walked in on this scene, she was furious. She hadn't invited Darriynn into her home, and she didn't know he was going to be there. It was a total surprise. Now, it's not uncommon for her kids to have friends come over to the house, but as a mother, she wants to know who and when someone is coming over. It's totally understandable. So Monica asks Darriynn to leave the house and tells him she doesn't want him to come around anymore and hang out with any of her children. She tells him he is no longer welcome in her home. Monica also gets onto her 2 oldest kids who are friends with Darriynn about having friends over without her supervision. So maybe Darriynn targeted 4-year-old Cash to get some sort of revenge on Monica and her family? Maybe he kidnapped Cash in retaliation for being kicked out of their home. The exact reasoning behind Darrynn's actions are unclear at this time, but they have the video evidence that confirms he kidnapped Cash. However, this evidence does not confirm that Darriynn murdered Cash. With all of the news coming to light on Cash Gernon and Darriynn Brown, an older gentleman came forward to the police. The man makes a report that a few months earlier, Darriynn Brown had actually broken into his home. He said that he was home and taking care of his 2-year-old granddaughter when Darriynn entered his home and started going through all of the rooms and rummaging through all of the closets. Well, when he found Darriynn in his home, he started yelling at him and asking him to leave immediately. He starts physically pushing Darriynn toward the door and manages to get him outside. He closes the door and tries to lock it. But Darriynn then kicked in the door and punched the older man right in the middle of the forehead. The older man stumbles back onto the floor. Then he goes into the living room of the home and finds the granddaughter fast asleep on the couch. He picks up the little girl and starts walking to the laundry room. The grandfather, still laying on the floor, is shouting and yelling at Darriynn to put his granddaughter down and to leave the home. Darriynn continues with what he's doing. So the older man uses all of his strength to get up off the floor and lunge at Darriynn. He pries his granddaughter out of Darrynn's arms, and the little girl is screaming and crying. He put her back down on the couch unharmed. Then he returns to Darriynn to once again try to shove him out of the house and get him out the door. When the 2 of them get close to the entryway of the house, Darriynn then punches the older man in the face and runs out of the house. That's the story that he told the cops. Of course, Darrynn's defense attorney said that it wasn't Darriynn and that they had no proof, and questioned why this old man had not come forward earlier to report this crime. My guess is that the old man didn't know who Darriynn was or how to identify him. But after seeing the media coverage about him in the Cash Gernon case, he could correctly identify the man who attacked him, his granddaughter, and his home. So now that's 2 incidents where Darriynn Brown broke into someone's home and tried to kidnap a young child. There's definitely a pattern here. Darrynn's defense attorney is hard at work for Darriynn Brown. He plans to have Darriynn plead insanity and that he is incompetent and cannot possibly stand trial. His attorney Heath Harris has been quoted saying, "I've made it no secret that I anticipate that we will be filing paperwork to claim an insanity defense. Not too much is known about Darrynn's pre-existing history of mental disability, but his mother Mimi Brown did tell the police the day they came to her house that he had mental challenges and was a patient at Metro Care Services, the mental health care facility. The prosecutors had a psychiatric expert conduct a mental evaluation of Darriynn and determined that he was unfit to stand trial. The defense's doctor came to the same conclusion months ago. Defense attorney Valerie Baston commented on the evaluation, saying, "Both reports basically reflect what Mr. Harris and I have been experiencing with our client Darriynn. He is not competent and needs to get treatment." The doctor who worked with Darriynn, Dr. Sanders, said it's possible that Darriynn will never be deemed competent to stand trial. If he is, and the defense does indeed raise an insanity defense, the prosecution will have the burden to prove Darriynn knew that his actions were wrong. And Dr. Sanders is quoted as saying, in order for that insanity defense to work, he's got to be insane at the time of the act. So at this time, the case is not closed, and Darriynn awaits for a bed to open up at the Vernon Psychiatric Hospital. If we could have gotten him the treatment that he needed, then, this tragedy may have never happened, Harris said. It's horrible what happened to Cash Gernon and his family, and it's really sad to think that maybe if Darriynn had received proper treatment for his mental health, that Cash could still be safe and alive. It's really important to seek out mental health care. So if you or someone you know is struggling with mental health, please try and get help. Dial 911 if the crisis is a life-threatening emergency. And for the National Suicide Prevention Lifeline, call 800-273-TALK. Or use the crisis text line. Text NAMI to 741-741 to connect with a trained crisis counselor to receive crisis support via text message. Let me know what you thought of today's story, and thanks so much for watching another episode of Killer Bites.